You don't even really call yourself a carnivore anymore. Like you changed your Instagram name and everything. Do you want to speak to that briefly?
Yeah. So the backstory here is that I guess in 2018, I cut out all the plants from my diet and basically ate meat, organs, and fat for close to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, I wrote the Carnivore Code, got interested in this carnivore diet, got interested in the potential for some plant foods to trigger autoimmunity in some people, which is kind of that's my framework, because I had pretty bad eczema for a long time in my life, and I had bad eczematous reactions throughout medical school, college, even residency, that spurred me to think about this idea, like, are all plants good for all people?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of these ideas around the carnivore diet. Now, the end of that story, or the next chapter of the story, was about 2 years into the carnivore diet. I started noticing persistence of unpleasant symptoms. So testosterone dropped to around 500 total, sleep disturbances, palpitations, muscle cramps when I was surfing or climbing. And I started to think, okay, maybe long-term ketosis is not great for me. And I was definitely in ketosis at the time, monitoring blood ketones with a meter, not deep ketosis, but definitely ketosis. And so at that point, I started to dig into the research a little bit more and understood that insulin signaling is critical at the level of the kidney to hold on to minerals, to hold on to potassium, calcium, sodium, chloride, magnesium, and that in long-term ketosis in most humans, you're going to become so electrolyte depleted that it's almost impossible to resolve that with enormous amounts of electrolytes, right? You can take all of the electrolytes you want. You can do so much salt. Your body's really not going to be able to hold on to those without some sort of an insulin signal at the level of the kidney. I've experienced this. Tons of people experience this with long-term ketosis. So at that point, I had to really kind of look at what I was doing and make this sort of learning judgment that long-term ketosis was not a great thing for me and probably not a great thing for most humans. And at that point, I added honey and then fruit to my diet, and it's been an evolution since then for probably the last 3 years. So now I've been eating fruit, honey as my main sources of carbohydrates, maple syrup, raw milk, the lactose in raw milk for going on 3 years now, and feeling much better. Testosterone is 800, free testosterone is great. Sex hormone binding globulin goes down. We'll talk about this. Free T3 goes back up. Thyroid hormones improve. Cholesterol, lipids go down. Still, my LDL-C or my LDL-P is above what many people would consider to be optimal. And we can talk about why I don't think that's an issue. But certainly there are changes that happen in humans without carbohydrates in their diet at the level of hormones, at the level of electrolytes, at the level of lipids. And these are interesting to me. So I'm actually, when people sometimes meet me or they talk to me now, they say, hey, I want to go on a carnivore diet. And I say, you mean an animal-based diet, right? And that's just a term that, I think the term came the first time I was on a podcast with Joe Rogan. He kind of coined that term and we ran with it. I think of animal-based as just a framework, like, okay, most of your diet is animal foods, at least in terms of calories. And I think most of my diet is now, it's organs, it's grass-fed meat, it's butter, it's tallow, it's raw milk. And then I get a significant amount of calories from carbohydrates in the form of fruit juice, honey, et cetera. So yeah, so that's an animal-based diet. And I think that works a lot better for most people. Now, to be fair, and what's interesting about this is a lot of people would look at that diet and say it's still very restrictive, quote unquote. We can talk about that because what am I excluding in an animal-based diet? I'm not eating grains. So white rice is kind of a gray area, but I don't eat white rice. I don't eat oats. I don't eat wheat. I don't eat beans. I don't eat seeds. I don't eat nuts. I don't eat leaves. And a lot of those foods are considered to be healthy by the mainstream. And so that is a similarity from carnivore that I've carried over, but I have started including carbohydrates in the form of the fruit and the honey. And the reason I do those, the intentionality there is, if you look at a plant and a plant's life cycle, the intention of the plant is to move its seeds to the next generation in a colorful, sweet fruit. And if you look at plant foods and you look at overarching terms like defense chemicals, the lowest amounts of defense chemicals are in the fruit. That's pretty clear. And the lowest amounts of those defense chemicals actually occur as the fruit ripens. So you can see all sorts of defense chemicals. We can talk about interesting examples if you want, or we can go deeper in the lipids. But things like non-protein amino acids, these are lower, and other plant defense chemicals, they're lower as the fruit ripens. So there's these signals within the plant kingdom that say, hey, this food is less toxic once I'm ready for that seed to go germinate. And that's when I want you to eat it. So that's where I am now with the animal-based diet versus carnivore.